Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear listeners, welcome to Radio Ramadan. My name is Hafiz Mushtaq from an organization called Spinney. I pray that everybody has had another blessed day, another blessed fast, and a blessed iftari. Alhamdulillah, today is the second in our series of sessions looking at all issues related to addiction. For those of the listeners who may not know, Spinney Drugs, Alcohol and Addiction Support Service is a local charity based within the community, run by members or volunteers from the community. And its specific aim is to support people who have developed an addiction to alcohol, an addiction to drugs, gambling, or whatever behaviors somebody has which they are having trouble overcoming or stopping. Last week, for those who may have tuned in, we were very fortunate to have with us Brother Arif Mogul, who's a counselor, a psychodynamic counselor, who has done some work, amazing work with some of the service users of Spinney Hill. And he gave us an insight into the role of counseling in helping people overcome addiction. Today's session, alhamdulillah, we're very blessed and we're very fortunate that we've been joined by one of our service users. So that's somebody who is now on a road, on a recovery path, who previously was dealing with addiction issues. And alhamdulillah, he's very kindly come in today to share with us some of his experiences. He's a young man. His name is Uzair, not his real name, of course. We're using that today to maintain his anonymity. So I'd just like to welcome Uzair. Uzair, welcome to the studio.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Just can I ask, how old are you?
20.
20, so mashallah, very young man. So I know this can be quite difficult, talking about things that you've experienced, and obviously you work with Spinney Hill, and I know you've probably lived a lot for your young age. You've been through a lot, mashallah. Not all of it good, but inshallah there's a bright future ahead.
Inshallah.
So what we thought would be useful for myself and also for the people listening at home is just to kind of go through a little bit about your background, about your journey into drugs, into addiction, and where you are now in terms of your recovery and the steps that you took into your recovery. So before we do that, I'd just like to find out a little bit about yourself, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, if I ask you anything you're not comfortable with, then by all means, you can say that. We don't have to talk about everything and anything. But it'd just be nice and just be useful for myself and for the listeners to get a picture of your life before, like, so what kind of childhood household did you grow up in? Were there people in your house that were also using drugs? Was there violence? Was there deprivation? Were you financially, was it a difficult situation financially? What kind of upbringing would you say you had?
Alhamdulillah, if it comes down to speaking about my parents, they gave me the best upbringing they probably could have.
Wow.
Come from a good family. My mum and dad especially, they sort of revolved their life around, praying. Especially 5 times salah. If we weren't praying Quran, they'd always say, look, namaz is the most important thing, pray your salah.
Okay.
And that was sort of a big thing growing up. They sent us to madrasa, they sent us to the best of schools. I have one older brother, but they sent us to the best of schools, gave us the best upbringing, gave us as much love as they possibly could.
So was it, I know you said that there was deen, there was love, but were they financially, was it quite, were you deprived of materialistic things growing up? So were they not that wealthy, so they couldn't give you kind of some of the things that maybe your peers had?
No, not at all. In fact, I probably had quite a few luxuries in comparison to my peers.
Wow.
They would go out of their way to get me the best things, make sure I had the best of the best, or whatever I wanted.
Okay.
In that sense.
MashaAllah. So you grew up in would you say it was a a nice part of the city, or was it an inner city area?
It was definitely, it's sort of out of the city. It's a nice area.
Okay, so like a suburban area.
Yeah, suburban area. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm getting a picture of. Would you say a happy childhood?
Yeah, I'd say it was quite a happy childhood.
Yeah, so you were brought up by loving parents.
Yeah.
You grew up in a nice part of the city, in a nice house, and you were given love. You were given materialistic possessions, things that you wanted, and you were also sent to good schools.
Yeah.
And also you had deen as well inside your family. So in many ways you had the full package. You know, sometimes people have a lot of deen, but parents don't give them time. Sometimes there's time, but there's not enough money to buy things that people want. But from what you said, from all aspects of the things that you might have wanted or needed growing up, you were fulfilled.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Like I said, everything was sort of given to me on a plate.
MashaAllah.
Anything I ever wanted, it was always, here you go, beta, and this is what we want to do for you. And it was always a sort of, you know, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Okay.
In that sort of sense, you do something right, you'll be rewarded. Sort of that positive reinforcement.
Right. And so you went to good schools as well, you said, and you went to madrasa. So what did you have any kind of behavioral issues or issues at school while you were growing up? You know, say, you know, in early teens from 11 onwards when you went to secondary school, were there any issues there?
I wouldn't really say so. I think my behavior sort of changed, and the pattern of behavior I went into sort of completely differed from what I used to be and what my family used to know. They used to know me as this sort of academic, bright sort of student. And I thought, how I feel is it sort of played on my ego.
Okay.
And you sort of get boosted by everyone sort of praising you constantly and consistently, and you sort of become complacent.
Okay. So were you getting in trouble in school or anything like that?
I used to, but not excessively or anything like that. Nothing that would be particularly concerning, especially for, you know, parents.
Right. So kind of low level disruption that a lot of teenage boys go through. So at what stage did you find yourself maybe changing slightly within yourself? Did you feel different at any point? Was there a trigger? Or how did you go from this sweet, innocent boy into maybe something else?
I think it started with the company I kept. Weren't exactly the best company. We used to sort of hang around. I used to hang around with the wrong crowd, especially a lot of the sort of older lads in school.
What kind of age would this be then?
This would be, I'd say it started around the ages of 11 and 12.
Right, so quite early on then,
Yeah.
In secondary school.
Yeah.
So were these friends you'd made at school, or was it friends outside of school?
It was all friends from school at the time.
Okay.
Like I said, the school I went to was quite good.
Yeah.
But the guys that were there, to be honest, how I see it, it doesn't matter where you go. There's always going to be some sort of troublemakers and something along those lines.
So, but did you consciously gravitate towards these type of people?
I think it was more of my personality type. I was more of a person who was friends with everybody, but I had my crowd.
Okay.
So I wouldn't particularly go out of my way and not hang around with someone, but that was sort of the people I wanted to hang around with.
So that was a conscious decision.
Yeah.
The ones who were slightly a bit more rebellious in nature, they're the ones that you gravitated more towards.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from? Any ideas? Or is it just like you say, you were quite a strong personality, a strong character?
I think it falls down to personality, but then again, I think it falls down to my home life was good.
Okay.
In that sense. So maybe I wanted something more. Maybe I wanted that sort of mischievous sort of side out of home.
You say you were a little bit bored, possibly?
Potentially. Potentially. Like I said, my parents did give me everything in terms of love as well, but there were quite a few times where it was sort of, you go home, you finish the rest of your day, you know, madrasa, come home, eat, and then you sort of go to sleep. There wasn't no sort of extracurricular activities or anything I could have done.
Looking back, what would you have liked to have done, do you think, at that age?
Personally, I would have loved to sort of indulge myself in a sport or, you know, something along those lines, boxing, karate. I feel like from a young age, it sort of builds discipline.
Okay. So do you think maybe part of what happened was a rebellion against that discipline?
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, So you're now about 12 years old, so you're in maybe year seven. So quite very early on in your kind of academic career. You're gravitating towards the wrong boys. At this stage, it's probably still low level misbehavior.
It was even up until I'd say the Ramadan of that year, which is when I first picked up cigarettes.
Ramadan of year seven?
Of year 7, yes.
Okay, so that's quite early on. So from the age of 7, you started to experiment with cigarettes?
Yeah. It wasn't more of a addiction, or it wasn't more of a sort of habit. I think it was more of the feeling of wanting to look cool, feel cool. And what started off as something just, it's a cigarette. You don't really think much of it, especially at that age. But only now do I realize the sort of effects it's had on me, and it is still having on me.
So would you say the cigarette was the gateway drug?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what started you on that kind of spiral.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of boys, a lot of young people do experiment to try cigarettes. But year 7, at age 11, how come? Because I would have thought that was very early. Would you say, how common do you think that would be?
In my sort of generation and time, it wasn't as common, but it was known that there were quite a few people actually smoking cigarettes.
Right. And this is during school day?
It would be school time, or before school, after school. We try and avoid smoking in school purely for the reason our school had quite strict sort of rules.
Yeah. And
if we were to be caught, it would put us in quite a bit of trouble.
Okay. And did your family, your parents have any idea at this stage you were smoking?
No idea.
Okay, so you're now in year 7. Was that the summer of year 7, you said?
So it would be gravitating into year 8.
Yeah, so between year 7 and year 8, that's when you first started smoking cigarettes. And then at what stage did it escalate from there then? What was the next stages, would you say?
It wasn't too long later. I had a change in school purely because of my behavior, and there was a few other things going on.
So your behavior deteriorated?
It did. It sort of went downhill. I sort of became very rebellious at home. I wouldn't like doing certain things. Madrasa especially, I think if I can remember correctly at the time, I was aiming to become a Hafiz, and I was in my first year. Wow. And it just sort of slowly sort of deteriorated in terms of my behavior, my attitude towards any sort of family member, or I mean especially my parents. But it wasn't, I'd try and keep it within the house, but there would be times where other family members would get involved, and I would get frustrated, or I'd lash out. Right,
so just tell me, if you can, in a little bit more detail, what kind of behaviors you were displaying at school, because schools are used to dealing with disruptive children, slightly, rebellious children who maybe speak out when they're not. But to get to the point where you're actually excluded, were you excluded?
It wasn't an exclusion. It was close to being an exclusion, but it was more of a family decision to move me.
Right.
Because like I said, the company I was having, I think the school also understood that it was the company I surrounded myself with.
Right.
And the only way to actually avoid that would be moving where I was attending school.
Okay. So again, I'm just to kind of reiterate, so, school's very, I know you weren't actually excluded, but you were close to exclusion. And it does take a lot for a school to get to the point where they can exclude a child. Excuse me. So would you say that it was quite a high level of disruptive behavior at that stage?
Yeah, it was constantly in class. If it wasn't bickering with another student, it'd be sort of bickering with the teachers, arguing with the teachers. And like I mentioned before, I knew myself to be an academic. I knew that I was smart because it was constantly reinforced by all of my family members, by my teachers. And I think the sort of rebellious side came out in me, and I was like, okay, I know I'm smart, so why not just mess around? Why not have fun while I'm sort of in school?
Yeah. So did the change of school have the desired impact that your parents would have been hoping for, would you say?
In terms of my education and where I was getting in that standpoint, yes. My behavior probably got worse.
Okay.
Because the summer of when I moved is actually the summer where I first smoked weed.
Okay, so now we're going into year 9?
Yeah, so year 8 moving into year 9, yeah.
Okay, so we had a period up to to the age of 11, year 7, where there was no issues. You were on the brink of starting Hafiz class. You were happy at home. You had a good upbringing. The summer of year 7, you experiment. You start cigarettes for the first time. At the end of year 8, you change school. And then in the summer of that year 8, going into year 9, so you would probably be about 12, 13.
Yeah.
That was the first time when you started to experiment with cannabis?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. So what led you to that? What were the steps that led you to trying cannabis?
I think, again, because I had moved school, I wasn't particularly happy with the sort of crowd that I was hanging around with there, so I looked for another crowd.
Okay.
And I ended up finding a crowd from another school where we clicked extremely well.
Right.
Now, that summer, we would go out a lot. If I can remember correctly, it was quite a hot summer.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be out all the time, going to Vicky Park, playing football.
Yeah.
And we'd do various other things.
Yeah.
And among them, like a lot of the guys I was hanging around with used to smoke cannabis.
Were they older than you? Were they your own age?
They were all, if not maybe 1 or 2, the same age as me.
Right.
And they had been doing it for, let's say, maybe 1 or 2 years prior.
Okay.
And for me, it was a start. And it began as a social thing.
Right.
It would only be maybe once, twice, every couple of weeks. Whenever somebody maybe had it, we wouldn't go out of our way. If another member of our group had it with them, we'd sort of join them and engage in that, indulge in that.
And what impact did that have on your behavior?
Again, behavior deteriorated even more. From what I remember, I became even more rebellious at home. I used to leave the house. So during arguments or anything that would sort of frustrate me or anger me, I would just leave the house. I'd throw a fit. I'd be, breaking things around the house, punching walls, doors.
So now it was aggressive. Now it wasn't just verbal. You were physically. You weren't physically aggressive towards your parents, but you were lashing out physically now. Okay, so there's quite a big jump then from just that kind of low-level disruption and low-level rebellion to being kind of physically damaging property. Yeah. Okay, so and then what happened after that then? So you started smoking weed occasionally, recreationally.
Yeah.
And you're still at school. Did you finish school?
I finished school, finished my GCSEs. And throughout that time, my relationship with my parents and a lot of my family members sort of deteriorated.
Okay.
I think they became suspicious.
Right. So they didn't know at this stage that you were taking drugs?
They didn't know it was drugs, but they were just suspicious of something. What that something was, I've now spoken and been open with them about it, and they still have no idea what they thought it was.
So they would you say they didn't have the knowledge or the education around drugs to be able to?
Yeah, it was exactly that. Not having the knowledge. Like I remember, I'd be able to go home, eyes completely bloodshot red, but there wouldn't be even the slightest chance that my mum would notice or even understand why my eyes were red. So it was easy to get away with saying, I'm tired, I need sleep. Okay.
And were you staying out late at this stage?
I'd say from maybe year 10, year 11, that's when the sort of late nights started. Hanging out, staying around, certain busy areas, just sort of childish behaviour, which I sort of look back on now and I see quite excessively compared to when obviously I was doing it, and it doesn't seem, or it isn't so long ago, but it's slowly deteriorating and it's getting even worse.
Okay, so what kind of behaviours are you displaying, are you doing at this stage then?
It's more antisocial behaviour, it's isolating myself from family, like aggressive tendencies, and it got to the stage where my relationship with my parents I'd completely lost it. They were on the sort of brink of kicking me out.
Right.
And
this is at the age of 16?
About 16, 15, 16, around that age.
What was it that you were doing that they thought that we almost need to get this guy out the house?
I think it was just the way that I was treating them, no respect. And it was more of, instead of having patience with me, they were having to tolerate me.
Right.
And I don't think, or I don't see any parent should have to tolerate their child.
No. What was your relationship like with your? I know you said you've got an elder brother.
Yeah.
What was your relationship like with him? Did he try to intervene? Did he try to speak to you as an elder brother?
Unfortunately, not. We actually had a very good relationship, and we still do to this day. Alhamdulillah. But he's quite reserved. He's quite shy. He's never sort of indulged in that sort of lifestyle himself.
Yeah.
So it was new for him.
Okay. So he didn't really know how he could help.
No, not necessarily.
Okay. So you finished school at this time. What kind of consumption? What kind of levels of consumption are we talking about?
I think year 11 is where I got quite heavy. Instead of just being a social thing, I started doing it alone. Like I said, the relationship with my family wasn't going so well. So my sort of coping mechanism was, I'm going to go and indulge myself in cannabis. And that's exactly what it was. And it did get better coming towards COVID.
Yeah.
But that's when the choice of substance changed.
Okay, so we started with cigarettes.
Yep.
Then we were occasionally using cannabis if your friends had it.
Mm-hmm.
Then that moved to more regular use of cannabis, and also not using it socially, but also using it in isolation.
Yeah.
You're now retreating away from your family, spending more time on your own. Your relationship with your family is almost broken down. This is all by the age of 16. And then you said that your choice of drugs is now changing. So what did it change to?
So to make it easier for me, like we all know, COVID was a bad time. None of us could sort of go outside, and if we did, it would be go out, come straight back home. So I think using cannabis would be difficult to get away with. Like my family were, I think at that point, sort of aware what it was. Especially
so they knew at this stage that you were taking drugs?
They didn't know that I was taking, but I think they were more aware of the sort of drug itself.
Of cannabis?
Of cannabis, yeah,
Okay.
because it was so widely used, and every time we'd sort of go out, you'd be able to smell it.
Right.
It's quite a pungent smell. It's very, very easy to detect.
Did they ever smelt it on you?
No, I'd always sort of spend maybe half an hour to an hour outside. I'd have countless chewing gums, Tic Tacs.
Okay.
Just to sort of get the smell out. And like I said, my parents didn't really understand the sort of bloodshot eyes.
Yeah.
So that was one thing I could get away with. But there is sort of ways to go around that. There's eye drops you can buy.
Okay.
So that's one of the ways that you can get rid of the bloodshot eyes.
What kind of times were you coming home at this stage?
I think late year 11, we're looking at probably 11, 12, maybe early hours of the morning. I remember coming home 3 o'clock sometimes.
Wow.
And it was a big stress, especially for my mum. She never used to sleep. She'd be awake. She'd be calling me 70, 80, 90 times.
Wow.
And that's no exaggeration. If you were to ask any one of my friends, they would tell you the exact same thing.
Wow. And what would you do? Just ignore the calls?
It would be straight ignore.
You just put the phone down?
Phone's in my pocket or phone's on Do Not Disturb, and I'm not going to answer.
Wow. And did you not have any consideration of what she might be going through? Or?
I think at the time I didn't. And now when I sort of introspect, and I sort of say to myself that what have I sort of put her through, and it's for any parent it would be a completely tough time, and especially for someone who's not educated or doesn't have the knowledge or doesn't know what's going on, it's extremely difficult.
Where would you say you were going to be out that late, or would you not say?
To be honest, I just say to them I'm going out. And whether or not they liked it, I was leaving the house. It was more of a sort of crybaby syndrome. I want it. I'm going to do it. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So what drugs did you start taking then? So
during COVID, I used to be on liquid THC.
Okay, so just for the benefit of some of our listeners, do you want to just explain what that is?
So that is, I'm sure everyone knows the sort of vape craze that's going on around now. It's a vape.
Yeah.
And in that vape, you put some liquid in. It's usually some sort of colored liquid. Majority of the time, it comes in a clear bottle, can be various colors. And just from that, you just refill your vape every time you need to fill it up.
So the vape that a lot of kids use, which is kind of different flavors.
Yeah.
But that's not a drug in itself.
That one isn't, no.
But you're saying that with that vape, you're filling it with
THC. It wasn't specifically the ones that the kids are hanging around with nowadays. It's more of the older ones. I'm not sure if any of the viewers will remember, but sort of the shisha pens where you can fill it up with liquid, and they're the sort of ones.
What I'm trying to get at is you were filling those uh, those pens or whatever you want to call them, with the vapes, with a drug.
Yeah.
Okay, and what is that drug? It's a derivative of cannabis?
It's supposed to be.
Okay.
I think we'll go on to what I ended up finding out what it was later on.
Yeah.
But from what I was told and what it was advertised as THC, so a derivative of cannabis.
Okay, and that gives you a high?
Yeah, it gives you the exact same high as a sort of joint would in that sense.
Okay, and can you buy that from the shops, or was that from dealers?
It would be from merchants or dealers.
Okay.
It isn't, from my knowledge, it's very hard to find it. And if you were to find it in a shop, it would be under the counter. It is possible. I've never experienced it in Leicester, but in various other cities, I know that it is readily and widely available.
Okay, and how much would that cost?
Dependent on how strong your tolerance is, you're looking at anywhere from 25 to maybe 40 or 50 pounds for a 10 milliliter bottle.
And how long would a 10 milliliter bottle last?
Again, dependent on your tolerance, you're looking at maybe 2-3 days. If you're really stretching it, maybe a week.
Right. So what would you say your tolerance levels were? What I'm trying to get at is how much money were you spending on this weekly?
At the time, on a weekly basis, I was probably spending about £80 a week.
£80 a week?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, even by my poor maths, that's a lot of money.
It's about three bottles a week.
Wow.
Along those lines.
How much were you spending monthly then?
You're looking at £400.
Wow. And were you working at this stage?
I wasn't, no. I was lucky enough to be getting money from my parents.
So they were giving you that amount of money?
Well, see, they would never know what it was for. It was always some sort of excuse with me. I need it for the gym, or I'm going to go buy something. And I'd never come back home with it, but my excuse would be I went out to eat.
Okay.
So that was a sort of easier way of getting around it.
Right. And do you think they suspected still at this stage?
No. They had no idea.
Okay.
Again, due to COVID, we were at home all the time. And if my mum is the type of person, if she's suspicious, she will point blank tell me that I'm suspicious, what's going on.
Okay. But she didn't.
So yeah.
And they never discovered any kind of paraphernalia in the house, in your room, or drugs or anything?
Like I said, the bottles, the liquid bottles she found on countless occasions, but because she wasn't educated, and I think a lot of parents and sort of teenagers out there right now aren't educated in what this is.
Okay.
So to the naked eye, it just looks like it's a normal liquid bottle. You fill up your vape and you carry on.
Okay, so at what stage did you feel, or did it get out of hand to the point where you felt that it was too much of an issue? It wasn't just something that you were doing for recreationally or for socially or for just to give you a nice feeling, but this was now a problem?
I think it was, we're looking at probably end of COVID.
Okay, what year is that?
So we're looking at 2020, end of 2020 to beginning of 2021.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of my college days.
So you went college?
I did go college, yeah.
Okay, which college?
QE.
Okay, so you went to QE, and at this stage you're spending nearly £400 a month.
Yeah.
So you said that it wasn't what you thought it was. What the drug? What did you think it was, and what was it actually?
It was. Like I said, advertised as THC. Later on, I found out after coming out that it was actually some form of what they like to call spice. Street name, I think, is usually Mamba, Black Mamba.
Just a synthetic drug.
It's a synthetic one. And after finding out, it's got various sort of chemicals in. You're looking at fish tranquilizers.
Wow.
And it derives from a white powder that comes from China. Okay. They do tend to mix it with this THC, which is a sort of resin and oil. But it is, to my knowledge, it is definitely a form of spice.
Okay. So what was your lowest point? At your lowest point, where had you got to?
I think my lowest point, I was in quite a dark place mentally, even physically. I sort of let myself go. I was completely lazy. I had no ambitions. I was very pessimistic. I wouldn't allow myself to see any family member. I'd sort of push them to the side. I wouldn't attend any family functions, any gatherings. And mentally, it puts you in a very dark place. You don't want to see anyone. You get to the point where you say to yourself, I don't want to be here anymore.
Okay. So you are at a point where you were having suicidal thoughts?
Yeah, along those lines, yeah.
Okay. So you're now, did you find yourself in a position where you were in debt?
I was. So at the time I was working, so we're talking about roughly about a year and a half ago now.
Yeah.
I started working, I started off well, and then again my sort of complacency and that sort of kicked in. And I used to use on the job. And at the time, my tolerance had built up so high. I was spending roughly £60 a day, so you're talking about £480 a week.
Wow, it's nearly £2,000 a month.
Yeah, give or take. Now, on a average sort of salary, I did have a decent salary at the time, so I was earning in a ballpark of £1,600 to £1,800 a month. But that wasn't enough. I was away from home. I needed to pay, certain bills and other things. So it would then lead to me asking for any sort of loans or asking the dealers that give it to me and I'll give you the money later. And it's
So how much were you in debt to the dealers?
by the end of everything, I'd probably say you're looking at in the ballpark of about £5,000 to £5,500.
Wow. I mean, what a transformation from where you were, what you described at the age of 11 to at this age you were 18, 19.
Sort of brinking on 20.
Wow. So what then pushed you to get help?
I think it was my family members who I was staying out of the city with had noticed a sort of significant change.
Yeah.
They knew something wasn't right. They knew I needed some form of help. And they recommended me to go home, back to my family in Leicester, which I did do for a certain amount of time. And then somebody in my family contacted Spinney Hill.
Okay.
Then I had yourself and Hafiz Afzal come to my house, and you guys sort of sat me down, talked me through, and it was a sort of relief that it was finally out.
Okay.
And it was also that there is people out there who understand me and they know what's going on.
Yeah.
I think you guys couldn't have come at a better time, in my personal opinion. Alhamdulillah, it was something I definitely needed.
Yeah.
And had I not had somebody to sort of push me and say, look, you need help, I probably would have been on a very dark path at this point in time.
So what support did Spinney Hill give you then?
In terms of support, there was quite a bit. You're talking spiritually.
Yeah.
They reconnected me with my creator. And I think that's a very important thing, especially in this sort of time and when we're in need.
Yeah.
And especially I'd completely lost my way. I wasn't praying my salah, and I'm sure you remember I mentioned I was doing Hafiz.
Yeah.
I did about 6 paras. Out of those 6, I think by the age of 20, I had completely forgotten how to read the Quran.
You actually not forgot the paras.
I didn't forget the paras. I forgot how to read the Quran.
Wow. So at Spinney Hill, for the benefit of the listeners, for those who want it, we have Quran classes on a Monday. We have spiritual classes on a Tuesday where we do dhikr. On a Wednesday, we have the gym for physical exercise. Thursday, we have group therapy. We have counseling. We have social evenings. How has that whole package helped you to make those changes, but not just make those changes, but to sustain that recovery?
I think it's being around people who understand, being around people who have been through what you've been through. There are quite a few guys there who have completely been through the trenches, but they're trying their hardest. And there isn't a single person there that isn't willing to take the time out of their day to help.
Oh, mashallah. And how are things now for you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm in a much better position with my parents, my family. They supported me through my journey 100%. They were behind me 100%, and I have nothing but gratitude towards them, because without them deciding that I needed to change in some form, I don't think I'd be in the position I'm in now. They're still constantly behind me. They're constantly reassuring me and reiterating the fact that they are with me 100%.
One of the things that we do with Spinney Hill, one of the first things is that often people in your situation have broken the ties with their family. So as an organization, we try to mediate to try to get the family back on board, because so many times the addict has let the family down. stolen from them, they've been aggressive towards them, violent towards them at times. How important is that family support in helping somebody to make that recovery?
It's definitely one of the most important things. I think especially having to sort of live with your family, if that is your situation, which I would recommend to anyone that is struggling, because if anything, our families always, or majority of the time, have our backs. And for them to understand what's going on more than just see it as, okay, he has a problem, he needs help. A lot of the time, parents, families, they see it as some sort of disease, and the person needs to go away, be cured, and come back, and they'll be completely fine. But after being educated, they realize that it is a long journey, and you need all the love and support that you can get, because being an addict, that's what you crave for. It's what you want. It's a sort of positive reinforcement and a positive feeling that you've got your family in your corner.
As a young person growing up in the community that many of the listeners will be living in as well, how big a problem do you think drug taking is amongst young people? Is it just something that the odd person does, or is it a bit more than that?
I think gradually over the years it's getting worse and worse. From when I started, yes, it was a problem, but it was I don't want to say minimal, because it wasn't, but there was very few people I knew that were using. Now I sort of see I say younger generation, and not much younger than me, maybe 4 or 5 years, but even that is a big jump, because now I see there's, at least from my sort of viewpoint, I see maybe 60%.
60% of young people.
I would put it at a very high percentage. I wouldn't go to the extent of saying that, you know, they're addicted.
No.
Maybe they are just experimenting.
Yeah.
And that is the case with quite a few, especially of the young generation out there right now. It's a sort of experiment. We don't like it, we move on.
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest issues at the moment is the vapes.
Okay.
Because I feel like that's going to be one of the gateways.
Okay. Like cigarette was for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there'll be, you know, a lot of parents listening now, from your experience, what kind of advice would you give them? What are the things that they should be looking out for with their young children as they're growing up in this community? You know, what should they be vigilant over? What would you say?
I think it all starts with behavior.
Okay.
Like how it started with me, behavior at home. Everyone goes through a change at a certain point. It's normal.
Yeah.
Up until it isn't. You know, aggressive tendencies. You become physical. Isolation is probably one of the biggest things. As teenagers, they want their space, but I think sort of excessive isolation is not good. You know, constantly on their phones, or just even going out with friends consistently and constantly. I think it would be a major concern, especially in this day and age. Because I see so many of the young generation now wandering the streets, and you know, they're smoking a vape or they're having a cigarette. I've seen countless, the previous city I was living in, I've seen countless children walking around with vapes.
Wow.
And when I mean literal children, you're talking maybe 9-10-year-olds. And I've even now seen my own young cousin who started to vape, who's 12 years old herself.
Well, she's a girl.
Yeah. And it's difficult for her. Her situation at home is completely different. Absent father. Her mother smokes, vapes, so it's something that they're bound to pick up. I think a lot of what children see is what they do.
Okay.
Instead of being told, they'll never listen to what they're told, but they'll always do what they see.
Yeah.
So I think leading by example is one, but then at the same time, watch the crowd that they're with, because there's an old saying: you can never lie down with dogs and not catch fleas.
Of course.
So it's definitely the friend circle. It's one of the main things that I think led me astray.
MashaAllah. I mentioned earlier some of the services and activities that we have at Spinney Hill. One of the things that we do is support for the family, so for the mothers and the sisters. And I think your mom accesses some of that support as well. Yeah,
she does. And she's feeling much better after speaking to some of the sort of counsellors that you guys have at Spinney Hill. Alhamdulillah, she's much better in the way that she understands me. Before, you know, she still loved me, but it was hard for her to understand me. And now slowly she's getting there. She's beginning to understand me. She's beginning to see that it is a very, very big problem, because now I'm very open with my mum.
Okay.
About my past and what I've been through, what I've done.
Yeah.
And she sort of gets a big shock that you did that or you did it with this person. And I never usually like to bring names into the situation because it's not good to air anyone's dirty laundry.
Of course.
But I'd like to be honest with my mum and tell her that this is what I was doing, and it is a very, very common problem. So if she can maybe share that knowledge with as many people as she can.
Inshallah.
And like you guys at the center, the knowledge that you guys have given her, alhamdulillah, it's helped her and it's also helped me sort of reintegrate with my family.
Alhamdulillah. Where would you think you would have been now without the intervention of Spinney Hill?
If not homeless or on the street, I'd probably say maybe dead, honestly.
Wow, that's a big statement.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, Allah protected you. And what about your hopes now then for the future? You know, at Spinney Hill, one of the other things we offer is employment support. So there's a specialist team that works people who have criminal records. I know that you don't, but many of our service users do. They find it hard to find employment. They have addiction issues, that they're in recovery. So we have a specialist team that supports people, and I know you've accessed that support through them as well. So what's your hopes now for the future?
Compared to in my active addiction, I'm completely changed. I'm optimistic. I know that there's something out there for me, and there will be something out there for me. And you know, going through this journey of recovery, it sort of made me realize that, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always been there for me. No matter what, I wasn't exactly the best person. I never used to pray. I lost my deen, but for some reason he was still there. And it sort of gave me that hope, and I needed to turn to Allah.
Inshallah.
It was something that had to be done, and needed to be done, to make me sort of be a better person. Now I'm much more optimistic. I can see a future. Before it was every day you're surviving to see the next day.
Wow. And you know, our slogan at the organization is reimagining futures, and that's what we want to do. That everybody. Have you relearned to pray the Quran yet?
Yeah. So going through my recovery, I relearned how to pray the Quran.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, I'm trying to learn those 6 paras that I did know.
Inshallah.
And inshallah, target is to know them by the end of Ramzan.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So one of the aims of the organization is not just to help people to overcome their addiction, but it's also to reconnect them to their faith, to reconnect them with Allah and His Prophet. So alhamdulillah, you know, may Allah make you a means to bring coolness to your parents' eyes, and also to many, many other people as well.
Ameen.
Inshallah. So just for the benefit again for the listeners, if there is anybody out there who's suffering with similar issues, if there's any parents concerned about their children, then inshallah Uzair is a living testimony that things can change, you know, even from the depths of despair and darkness where you were suicidal, to be to a point now where you're optimistic for the future. So there'll be other people, other young people, other mothers like your mother going through similar things. So if there's any message to take home today, is to know that you're not alone, and there are people out there. There is a service out there that can support you with this. And so if anybody is struggling, then they can get in touch with Spinney Hill. We're based on Chesterfield Road, next to the furniture shop opposite Pack Foods. It's a free service. It's confidential. It's community-based. It's run by volunteers. The email, if anybody wants to get in contact, is info@spinneyhill.org.uk. So that's info@spinneyhill.org.uk. And the contact number is 0300 124 0945. So that's 0300 124 0945. So like I said, the offices, the Wellbeing Centre is on Chesterfield Road. There's usually somebody there between the hours of 11 and 4, and then again between 7 and 9, so people can also walk in, or they can make an appointment. So again, just want to, you know, say a deep felt jazakallah to Uzair. It's never easy doing these things and talking so openly, but inshallah your testimony will be able to help lots of other people. Next week, inshallah, the show will be hosted by Sister Halima. Inshallah, it promises to be a really interesting show. We have a female service user, because unfortunately there's an increase in the number of young girls, Muslim girls, who are becoming addicted to substances. So she'll be sharing her life story and her testimony with us, like Uzair did. And again, hopefully that will be a wake up to the community to let them know that this is an issue, but also again that there's help out there. May Allah Ta'ala bless all of us.